this is not a doomsday kind of scenario. So I see Ukraine surviving this, regardless of what happens and what President Trump does. I don't see Russia actually getting its way in Ukraine, first and foremost, because of President Zelenskyy and because of the Ukrainian people. I don't see Russia making much headway in Europe as well, because Putin, when he's arrogant, he's going to start making mistakes.
Well, let's speak now to Igor Novikov, former senior advisor to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who oversaw US-Ukraine relations during the previous Donald Trump presidency. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Hey, Chloe.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. And before we get into details of Trump and what that relationship was like last time around, what do you make of the sort of things we've been hearing over the last few days? You know, Mike Waltz talking about Trump is very frustrated with President Zelenskyy after he levelled unacceptable insults at the president. Remember, of course, President Zelenskyy said that Trump is living in a disinformation space. Do you think it's been a mistake by President Zelenskyy to get kind of in this sort of tit-for-tat war of words?
No, I don't think so. And let me explain that too. So I've dealt with President Trump before. And unfortunately for us in Ukraine, people around him, I'm not going to name names, and President Trump, they don't regard Ukraine to be a significant world power. So we're considered to be somewhat of a banana republic by them. And so that level of kind of overinflated expectations and arrogance, that kind of shows. And, you know, it led to his first impeachment when he basically demanded that we investigate then candidate Biden. So the same thing actually happened with the minerals deal. And when he heard no, and no that he didn't expect, obviously, you know, tempers flared. So that's what happened. I don't think President Zelenskyy was wrong in what he said, because you know, President Trump needs to hear a no from Ukraine. So we are a part of this process of, you know, potential peace negotiation. And we're not just some, you know, country that's going to be told what to do and that's just going to surrender at the first request. But secondly, more importantly, President Trump and especially people around them, they're making a lot of mistakes. They're truly kind of falling for that Russian love bombing, for that, you know, disinformation that's being fed to them, especially Elon Musk, especially a few other people. And because of that, we need to pull him out of that, you know, disinformation bubble. And like, look, my message is simple. If Nigel Farage actually says, listen, mate, you're wrong, and he did say that Zelenskyy is not a dictator, maybe it's time to slow down and listen.
I'm really interested, gosh, there's so much to unpick from what you've said there. I'm really interested that you say that Trump and also the people around him essentially don't consider Ukraine to be a major power. You talk about saying that they consider it to be a banana republic. Did you get that impression from when you were President Zelensky's advisor during Trump's first administration in those meetings that you had with him? Is that the impression he gave you back then?
It is. And I'm getting a very scary sense of deja vu at the moment as well, because the fact that President Zelenskyy wasn't invited to even that initial kind of contact with Russia kind of shows that President Trump is after a quick peace at any cost. And unfortunately, there's a big difference between, you know, a lasting and fair peace and surrender.
Lots of people who are around Trump who deal with him, including Nigel Farage, who you've just mentioned, talk about the need to take Trump seriously, but not literally. When you hear words like President Zelenskyy is a dictator from the mouth of the US president, what do you make? Give us a sense of what those conversations are like in the room. Do you take President Trump literally?
No, I don't. But we have to remember that, you know, unfortunately, not everyone has the privilege of actually reading between the lines and knowing, you know, President Trump as a person and having studied him for a long time. So, unfortunately, the messaging he kind of carries across at the moment is playing in Russia's favor. So that's a bad thing. And obviously, a lot of Ukrainians are infuriated. But if we look at the bottom line of this whole situation, it was actually beneficial to Ukraine because we've witnessed over the last few days a major rally around the flag effect, something that's been missing for months, if not years, in Ukraine because of the war fatigue. So that's a good thing. And also, like, look, I think there are a few things at play here. Does President Trump like Ukraine and President Zelenskyy? I wouldn't say no, but I'd definitely question a yes to that question, right? So is President Trump after that minerals deal? Yes, and that's a part of a negotiation. That's his usual negotiation style. So I wouldn't read too much into it. Now, is that messaging in this day and age damaging to the world? I would say yes, because, like, look, if you look at the dynamic of this negotiation between Russia and the US, Putin is not making concessions. In fact, Putin is raising the stakes. He's saying he's not willing to meet President Trump unless certain conditions are met. So Putin is literally wiping the floor with Trump, and Trump just projects his rage and fury at Ukraine. I mean, if you study Elon Musk carefully, that's something he's prone to doing. That narcissistic kind of projection that if somebody's strong, or somebody perceived by them as strong, is saying no to them, they usually kind of vent and take it out on the weak ones.
One of the things that people are saying who are trying to look at things in a positive lens at the moment, because goodness gracious me, we need to cling on to whatever we can. They're saying that what Trump says in public might not necessarily be what he is saying in private. Clearly, as you've pointed out, the things that he's talked about, that Europe needs to protect their own security, that has led to some action. There are European leaders who are now meeting and talking about raising the amount of money that they give to NATO, which is something which Trump has talked about for many, many years. So by being disruptive, by taking a different approach, Trump is getting the response he wants. Do you feel that what Trump is saying in public could be different to Russia in those meetings? You've been in meetings with President Trump. Did he say one thing in public and then something different to you in those meetings?
Well, there isn't a simple answer to that question. I mean, obviously the messaging, behind the scenes and the public messaging is different and has been different for years now. But there are a few things to emphasize here. First and foremost, I haven't said that what's going on is actually necessarily a bad thing, because that rally around the flag effect that I'm seeing in Ukraine and the fact that President Zelensky's approval rating in Ukraine is actually higher than that of President Trump during his first 100-day honeymoon with the American people. So that's one thing. But we also see, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're seeing that within NATO. We're seeing that in Europe. And that's a good thing, because that's something that has been missing. Now, is Trump triggering this intentionally, or is that basically a warranted reaction to a very dangerous situation? That remains to be seen. Only time will tell. But I can tell you one thing, this is not a doomsday kind of scenario. So I see Ukraine surviving this, regardless of what happens and what President Trump does. I don't see Russia actually getting its way in Ukraine, first and foremost because of President Zelenskyy and because of the Ukrainian people. I don't see Russia making much headway in Europe as well, because Putin, when he's arrogant, he's going to start making mistakes. So you just wait and see. But there's also a very important dynamic that I haven't heard anyone mention just yet. What President Trump is doing, and that kind of invoking that emotional response from the Western leaders, from Ukraine, could lead to a very dangerous situation where people are going to start paying attention to China. And I think if Trump truly believes that Putin is, his potential partner or ally, or whether it's a bromance, whatever, and Putin's going to choose him over China, he's going to learn it the hard way that that's not the case. Now, what's happening at the moment, China is just waiting to see if Trump is going to destroy this house of cards. And if he does, they're going to jump in, and that could spell some really difficult times for American foreign policy. So this situation, I would describe it as basically the situation of peak uncertainty. So a brand new day brings a brand new problem. But at the moment, I'd say I'm more optimistic than pessimistic.
Fascinating to speak to you and get your insights. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
That is Igor Novikov, former senior advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky. He was in the room with Zelensky and Donald Trump during Donald Trump's first presidency. And it's a really interesting insight there. I mean, Igor was saying that the people around Trump, he didn't want to name them, but the people around Trump and Trump himself don't consider Ukraine to be a major power. He says he believes that they think Ukraine is a banana republic, but he talks about overinflated expectations and arrogance of the US. He thinks that Volodymyr Zelensky's done nothing wrong in his language towards Donald Trump. But interestingly as well, he talks about he doesn't believe this is a doomsday scenario, talking about, what has happened, whether it was intended by Donald Trump or whether it was just a kind of consequence of what has happened. Is people are rallying around the flag. Europe are essentially stepping up, starting to look at spending more money on defence, and that can only benefit. But it did raise a smile when he said that Trump and Elon Musk especially are falling for Russian love bombing.
I think that part particularly, and also the do we need to get more creative? Are we kind of set on this one-track mind of a peacekeeping force, some sort of reassurance force to enforce any ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine? But actually, should there be alternatives being considered to direct security guarantees? For example, should we keep boosting Ukraine's own deterrent capabilities while trying to address the underlying causes of this particular war right now? Would they be more credible, more effective than some sort of peacekeeping force that everyone's having to dredge up out of the dust of not spending enough money for decades on defence?
Well, I was going to say the argument has always been that the weapons that have been given to Ukraine throughout this war have been enough to keep Russia at bay, but not enough to win the war.
One of the other parts of that is that everything has felt like it's moving at breakneck speed, and it is to an extent, but we are still in the early days of negotiating.